You are listening to Detroit Craft Academy, episode number 15.
Detroit Craft Academy. Detroit Crafts with Jody. Detroit Craft Academy.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into the show, episode number 15. Just in time, today I'll be interviewing Marcy Davy of All Things Grow. She's actually one of the organizers of DIY Ypsi, which is coming up here August 5th and 6th is the DIY Ypsi show, and that will be at the Corner Brewery in downtown Ypsi. For more information on that, you can go to DIYPSI.com and you can find out more about the Ypsi Craft Show. Also, applications for Detroit Urban Craft Fair are now open. If you head on over to DetroitUrbanCraftFair.com, you can apply for the holiday show, which is coming up on the first weekend in December. And there are still spots left for the Hamtramck Labor Day Festival for any artsy entrepreneurs out there that would like to take part in that this year. And that is the first weekend in September. And you can apply to that show by heading on over to hamtownfest.com. On today's episode, I interview Marcy Davy. Marcy is a silkscreen artist from Ypsilanti, Michigan, and also one of the founders of DIY Ypsi. I had a lot of fun interviewing her in her home studio, and I really hope that you guys enjoy listening. On with the show. Today I'm talking with Marcy Davy. Marcy is an artist from Ypsilanti, Michigan, and I am here with Marcy in her home studio. Hi, Marcy. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So first, why don't you start off a little bit by telling us your background. Where did you grow up and where did you go to school?
I grew up in the kind of agricultural area in central Michigan between Lansing and Mount Pleasant, and then I went to Central Michigan University.
Did you grow up in like a small town?
Yes, it's called St. John's.
I've never heard of it.
It's north of Lansing. Super agricultural community. Very small town vibe for sure.
Yeah. Did you come from a creative family?
Yeah. Let's see. Yes. My parents were both. I kind of have the best of both worlds. My mom is an amazing artist. She never really did anything with it business-wise. But she can draw like nobody's business. She actually made that Neil Young Harvest poster.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, she lettered all of that, so definitely got some of that from her.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to take a picture of it and put it on the page so everyone listening can see it.
My dad ran a tiny one-person heating and cooling company, so I got most of the entrepreneurial spirit from him. He refused to work for anyone else when I was growing up. And even when times were bad, he stuck to his guns and did it anyway.
Oh,
so definitely learned a lot from him. And then both of my grandparents and uncles, everyone makes stuff. My grandparents have made maple syrup. My family has for generations. So yeah, definitely a lot of DIY spirit and some creative parents and a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. My dad owns a plumbing company, so
you can relate. Yes,
same. Yeah.
It is. It was crazy growing up with him to see someone so passionate about heating and cooling. You wouldn't. He would make me go to job sites with him. He would lure me with donuts and chocolate milk in the morning to get up early. And then I would go help him on job sites, and I would do his books sometimes. When I was in middle school, I would log all of his receipts and everything and kind of whatever I could to make spare cash from him. So yeah, that definitely wore off on me for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A part of me that can't work for anyone else. All comes from him.
I think that's probably where I get it from my dad too. He used to bring me to his work sites and have me solder pipes at 8 years old.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Here, kid, you have to do this. Dad, just sit down there and do these pipes.
I know, it was crazy. It was crazy to see him be so excited just about, you can kind of see it in the studio down here. He would take me down in basements and show me where he had laid in all of the ductwork. And he was just perfectly laid ductwork to him was a thing of beauty, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was cool.
So, when you decided to go to, did you always know that you wanted to be an artist when you grew up?
No, I started out as, in high school, I was super into reading and writing, and I was going to be an English major in college and an art minor. I've always loved to draw, but English kind of superseded it a little bit for me when I was growing up. I was editor of my high school paper, and I thought I was going to kind of keep going into that and teaching English and maybe journalism at some point. But I had an art minor, and I walked into my first printmaking class the start of my sophomore year and just like fell in love, changed my major, or I switched them actually. I ended up minoring in English instead.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, that was when I flipped it and majored in art instead.
So, out of school, then, how did you start All Things Grow? Like, how did you get started?
That is a great question. Can I rewind back that far? It was so long ago. So after I finished, they didn't teach me anything about business and art in school.
I always I just like getting kicked out. Like, now what do I do?
I remember like a vague one-day lesson that was like, here are the slide. Here's how you make a slide, because this was like 2004 when I finished undergrad. They were like, here's how you make your slides, and then they didn't even like talk about how you would take those to a gallery to get representation or anything. It was just so, there was nothing. So yeah, I like had my shiny art degree in my hand, and of course there were no jobs, none. So I started substitute teaching, and I thought, this is how I'm going to make this work. I'm going to go back to school to teach art, and that's basically the only way I'm going to find anything, any kind of artistic path where I can actually make a living. So I went back to school. I went to Eastern to get certified to teach art. And my last semester at Eastern, I had to, of course, they didn't count like half the studio classes from my undergrad,
Right.
So I had to take a textiles class. And the textiles class, one of the very first things we did was screen print on canvas in the class. And I had never, obviously I have a printmaking degree, so I had screen printed in undergrad, but I'd never printed on canvas or on fabric of any kind before. And it was just like magical to me. And I could not stop doing it. It was just, I like was taking everything home and doing it. And what's so great about screen printing is that you can really do it just about anywhere, and it costs almost nothing to start up. So like, kind of the reason I'd never made prints after I got my bachelor's degree for those few years was because you need a press and like all this equipment, and screen printing, you don't need any of that. It was like, it's like $40.
Yeah,
and you're ready to go. So we were screen printing on canvas, and after that class, I just kept doing it at home. And by that point, I was finishing up my teaching degree, and I was just like, my heart was not in it at all. I had student taught, and I was like, this is really hard. At the time, my day job, kind of all while I was getting certified to teach, was at painting signs at Trader Joe's.
Okay.
Which was like kind of a dream job for me. And it was like, okay, either teach, which is exhausting and you don't make very much money, and it takes like every ounce of energy you have, or like kind of carry on making, I started doing a lot more freelance and like chalkboards for other people, and the prints kind of went along with that, and I was able to kind of just take that to the next level instead, and I never ended up teaching. I think I applied for maybe 2 jobs.
How long? So when were you working at, when did you start working at Trader Joe's?
So basically after I finished the bachelor's degree, I was subbing for about a year, and then I decided I was going to move to Ypsi, study art education at Eastern, and that was when I got the job at Trader Joe's. So the entire time I was in school studying education, I was also making signs, and by the time I finished student teaching, I was like, I could not wait to get back to my sign making job fast enough.
Yeah.
It was like I knew it wasn't for me. It was a very expensive mistake.
Yeah. Well, at least,
it taught me what I want to do.
Something, right? So how did you get started with your business? Because you started All Things Grow while you were working at Trader Joe's.
Yes. Yep. So in 2008, I took that class and continued to screen print on my own afterward. And that fall, I was kind of looking for opportunities to sell my work, trying a couple things out. Things weren't really happening. And that fall, I opened an Etsy store and started getting a couple sales that way. And then I did my first show that fall as well, which was a little festival in Carytown that Kate Kehoe used to put on. But yeah, that fall I did that first show, and then that year I did Shadow Art Fair and DUCF and was just like completely blown away. Like even that first show, I think I made $300, and I remember calling my husband and being like, oh my God, I can't believe that we made $300. We're rich. Like, this is just incredible. Like, people are just coming up to me and buying things. Like, I can't even believe this is happening right now. So,
My first show was Shadow, and like I remember doing it.
That is a crazy first show.
Oh my gosh, like I just remember like walking out because the guy that I was dating at the time, he was like, you gotta try art fairs, like I think like you would do really good at it. I'm like, okay. And then yeah, I think I like walked out of there and I was like, oh my gosh, people are giving me money. This is more than I can make like in a weekend. Yeah.
I know, it was so, those first, like, that whole first year was just like a dream.
Yeah.
It just felt like everything you wanted in your life had manifested all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
Yeah. I think it's always really funny though too, because like now I look back at it and like, you know, you make $300 a day or like whatever, and then but you don't take into account like all the time that you spent and like all the materials that you bought.
I know. You're just like, this day I made this much. It's crazy.
I know.
If I could make this much every day, I'd be a millionaire.
Oh, it's so funny. So how has your process changed since you started working? Have you continued to make certain prints, or have you like retired ones and gotten new ones?
Yeah, I don't think I make any of the same designs I made back then. There are a few designs that I've probably had for 3 or 4 years going now, but for the most part, I phase stuff out when I get tired of looking at it. And tired of, you know, with printing something by hand, you really kind of have to really love what you're printing if you're going to spend a couple hours printing up 100 of them. So I've definitely gotten rid of some designs over the years for sure. When I first started, so all the screen printing I do is kind of a lo-fi process. I either paint directly onto a screen with the screen filler stuff, that red stuff that's on that screen, or I use cut vinyl, just made with like a silhouette machine, and put that on the screen. When I first started, all of my screens were made out of hand-cut contact paper. So I was cutting everything out with an X-Acto knife by hand. This is much faster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
but
you did that with like cutting on vinyl and then did that, or?
Yeah, basically, when I first started, yeah. And I used contact paper, which is even less kind of willing to work with you than vinyl is.
Wow, that's crazy.
But part of that, too, is you couldn't preserve the screens all with contact paper on them. So I would print maybe 10 or 15 at a time, and then I would never make that design ever again.
Whoa.
That was my first few years, was just like, very small batches. Now I'll try to make 100 to 200 of something for the most part.
So with the ones that you do now, how is the process different?
Instead of just, putting it right on contact paper, cutting it out, now I kind of go through a more digital process. So I'll draw something, I'll turn it into a digital file. In the last year, I just started using a tablet to draw on. Instead of, before I was kind of doing a combination of, like, I'd Sharpie something, and then I would put it in Photoshop and Illustrator and refine it, and then turn that into the cut file. But now I'll draw directly onto the tablet instead, which is awesome. And turn that into a vinyl cut.
Nice.
So things have changed a lot. And the vinyl cuts I kind of preserve, that usually will last a few hundred prints, too, if I take really good care of the screen.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you bought a vinyl cutter? Yeah.
Yep, yeah, just one of those little Cricut silhouette kind of machines.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It has dramatically changed things. I really like kind of a more lo-fi process for screen printing.
Yeah, your stuff is a lot different than any other people that silkscreen. Like, when I first saw your stuff, I totally thought that you were, like, staining them, like, your canvas with ink. It doesn't even look like...
It has more of a stenciled feel, I think, because it's definitely, what I love about it is that it has forced me, it will, instead of you kind of being able to just print whatever you want, it definitely forces you to kind of pare things down to their lowest common denominator, and really simplify things, and I've always loved that about it.
And your color palette has stayed pretty much the same throughout, too. Do you have, like, inspiration that you pull from for your work?
That's a good question. I don't know if I necessarily have color inspiration. I mean, definitely anything involving plants, water, for sure. But what I do always do when I mix ink is I add a little bit of the complement and a little black and a little white. So it's a slightly more muted color palette for that reason, I feel like. And that's probably been able to keep things kind of consistent across the board.
Yeah. And now you're working with your husband, too, right? Does he helps you?
Yeah, so around 3 years ago, I went full-time with All Things Grow, and 2 years ago, so he's always made all of the wood components of the line, so all of the frames that everything's stretched around, any of the plywood that I print on, all those things, he's always been the one that delivers all that to me all finished. So for a long time, it was just a part-time endeavor for both of us, but now we both do it full-time.
Oh, yeah. So like this is just the two of you now doing that?
Yep, and I have an assistant too that comes over a couple days a week.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about how you deciding to go full-time, like what that experience was like?
Yeah, sure. It was actually it was crazy. I felt like I don't often like call things a sign or kind of prescribe that whatever onto things, you know. But it was one of the first years I had done the Autumn Renegade Craft Fair in Chicago, which is like hundreds of vendors, you know, and it's a lot of kind of the superstars of the handmade movement are there. And I remember just going there and talking to those people all weekend, and just, you know, so many of them, it's their full-time thing, you know, and they're making it work. And I remember by the end of that weekend on my way home just being like, why not me? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why not? And I came home to a letter from my former employer saying that my health insurance, because of Obamacare, would be cut at the beginning of the following year. It would not have been cut if I had gone, I was just part-time there because I was doing both. So I had the option to go to full-time and keep my health insurance or to just lose it entirely. And it kind of just felt like coming home to, it was the first thing I did. I opened my mailbox and pulled out that letter, getting home from that show.
And thinking about
it. And I was just like, it was all of the sign I needed. Like, why are you even, just do it. Just take a leap.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, like, what was that like for you at first? Like,
well, I didn't technically quit for another 6 months, I think. It wasn't just an immediate thing. And it got to the point where I was just kind of, the great thing about that job and about working retail while you're an artist, I think, is that you're able to kind of slowly step back, you know? I talk to so many people that have super full-time gigs and then want to be able to, you know, start their own business, and it's really difficult to do when you're working 40 hours a week somewhere else.
Yeah.
So what was great is I had slowly just kind of stepped that back as business had gotten busier and busier. And I was down to 1 day a month, which was the least amount they let me work. And it was time for my 1 day a month. I think this was like October 2014, maybe. My 1 day a month was the next day, and I had so much to do. Yeah. I was like, I can't go to work. There's too much to do. It can't happen. And I made the decision in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I called them and I said, here's my 2 weeks and I can't even make it in tomorrow. So,
Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah. And it still has worked out. Fingers crossed. But yeah, it was definitely, I think if you're able to do that, it's a much less scary of a jump
To transition.
than if you're just abandoning a full-time job. I would recommend that route to anyone.
Yeah, I transitioned similar to that. Like, I went down from, like, 5 days a week to 4 days a week. And then somehow, out of, like, I don't know how I got so lucky, but I was able to, like, take weekends off, too, which if you work retail, it's like,
Yes.
what the
heck?
heck?
I know. I was able to also because I was in the sign department and it was,
Yeah, and, like, just, like, doing craft fairs and stuff during the weekends. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. I cannot even believe how, like, much I used to bust my ass. Like,
Right? Oh, my
it's incredible.
God. And
Yeah.
now we just do it in a different way.
For sure.
So what's your favorite thing about owning your own business?
It's definitely the flexibility and control over my own time, for sure. I absolutely love it. I love that I'm just kind of, I don't know, I've always hated having a boss. I've always been like that person that's like, I think I can run your company better than you can.
Oh
and
my
like,
gosh.
I think you're making all these mistakes. And that person is never appreciated in a traditional workplace.
Oh, no.
Ever.
I was that person,
Yeah.
too. It's like, why are you talking back to me?
I know, yeah. That's not a model employee at all. So to never have that kind of like drama and feeling in your life anymore and just be able to pick your own course and do whatever it takes to get there has been everything. And just being able to go do whatever you want when you want to do it. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, for sure. So do you have any resources that have helped you along the way that like that you know that like you wouldn't be where you were?
Yeah, for sure. One of I've transitioned to wholesale a lot, and one thing that's helped me a ton with wholesale, you can just Google it and it will pop up. It's called Indie Retail Academy. It was founded by a shop owner in the UK, and she has a ton of free resources, a ton of stuff you can pay for that's kind of all electronically delivered, like PDFs and stuff. The first line sheet I made was an exact replica of the one that the sample she had made. And there wasn't a ton of resources for wholesale available at the time. And I'd even, talked to a couple of people that had been doing it. Well, there was one in particular who offered to help me and then kind of backtracked on helping me because she didn't want the competition. So it was there was like a good year where I was trying to find help for starting that arm of my business and running into a lot of walls, and Indie Retail Academy was huge. Helped me a ton.
I actually am very familiar with, and I would totally recommend that to anyone listening at home because that is like a really good thing. And I'll make sure to put those links in the webpage.
Yeah, she has support communities on Facebook and everything. I just love her. She's great.
Yeah. I like the way she talks to people too.
I know. Her style is
Your very special stuff are like my very special item.
I know. It's so cute. I love how she talks to people.
So good. So what's your favorite thing about being an artist in Michigan?
The community, hands down. You cannot... now that we've I feel like our little Michigan circle is I know a lot of makers throughout the Midwest now, and I've heard horror stories almost, and it could not be more different here. It didn't really, I feel like it was my first Detroit Urban Craft Fair when I really got a little more plugged into that community. All of the women who run Handmade Detroit all talked to me that weekend. All were just so supportive, so much we love your stuff. I honestly don't even really feel like I found my tribe in life until I started doing this. And you find all these people who, if you've ever felt like you're weird or stick out like a sore thumb, or the things you're interested in are not like the people that you've grown up with or known your whole life, then when you find the people that all have that super weird shared interests in kind of history. It's just crazy. It's just changed everything.
Yeah.
And to have people that you can talk to is awesome.
Oh,
it just
my
could not
gosh.
be. I couldn't do this without it, for
I
sure.
100% agree. So in addition to being an artist, you're also one of the organizers behind a local indie show in Ypsi called Dipsy. How did you guys get started with Dipsy?
The year was 2010. Ypsi had a long-running independent craft fair that I think we've already talked about, called Shadow, Shadow Art Fair, and it was one of the first indie craft fairs in the country. I think it was kind of on the forefront of all of that, and they had decided, for whatever reason, to stop doing their holiday show, and because there were Sherry and I especially. And Cree, we'd been doing their holiday show and other holiday shows for so many years, we just could not. We all knew so many artists make a living off of those shows at the end of the year, and we just were like, if they're not going to have one, someone has to have one, because people in Ypsi were they were devastated about it. Like, they've become. What was great about starting a show here was that there was already a community that was tapped into that whole scene and loved it, just, you know what I mean, could not get enough of it, and they all hated the thought of losing a show, so we kind of sprang up with a holiday show in the absence of Shadow Art Fair, and yeah, it was a huge success from the start.
And so the next DIY Ypsi show is coming up here in a couple weeks. Do you guys have anything up your sleeve that's a little bit different for this year than...
Well, last year, this was my brilliant idea to have a petting farm at the show, which we thought was going to be... We were like, every year we try to do one crazy thing at the summer show.
Year,
that was
right?
last year, yeah. Last year, we were like, oh, let's have this petting farm. It'll be great. We put the deposit down on it, and we posted about it on the internet, and immediately got this crazy backlash from animal rights groups. They were immediately on the phone calling up,
of course, Ann Arbor
health department to be like, you can't have animals here.
They're fun animals, though.
And we, it was 2 days before the show, and we ended up being able to have them through some kind of crazy loophole involving, the USDA is who oversees, the health and safety of breweries as compared to the actual, health department that looks at restaurants. So it was kind of, we got to follow their rules instead and have this petting farm. But the petting farm was just an animal kicked a kid, and then
last
year, and then there were teenagers there basically to wrangle the animals, and after the llama kicked someone, he wrangled the llama in front of everyone in a way that no one was comfortable with how he treated the llama, and it was just kind of a nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
Just you can't control animals, and it was out of control. And so we've tossed around. We're actually meeting tonight, and I don't know if we'll pull something interesting out of our sleeves like that still yet, but we're a little stunned. We're just not stunned is not the right word, but we're a little playing it safer than the petting farm. So we'll see how that goes. This year, we do have, every summer festival, we have a lineup of indie music all weekend. And this year, we're trying something new. And at the end of the night, we're going to have a DJ in the beer garden instead of just music on the stage all weekend. So we're hoping
that'll be awesome.
Yeah.
That'll be really nice.
It's kind of the way it's always been laid out is that the music is kind of on the far end. So hopefully this way it kind of brings everyone back together at the end of the night.
Yeah. You guys have done a really awesome job organizing that show.
Yeah, the summer show is so fun for me. And I love having music there and being able to kind of take some of those booth fees and plug it back into our local music scene, and supporting those people has been super rewarding.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. That's
especially
great.
Ypsi has kind of struggled to keep live music venues open and around. I feel like that's kind of, a hard thing in any small town. But yeah, so it's nice to be able to kind of give that little thing back to our community every year.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And have it be, $1 admission is great too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's great that, like, you guys have that. Have you found, since you've started the show, have you found your sale, like, you as a business, like, you think that it has, like, helped your business launch a little bit more?
Running Dipsy? That is a good question. Well, I mean, doing Dipsy every time has not hurt. I'm pretty sure at this point I probably have a print in just about every house in Ypsilanti.
That's awesome.
So it's crazy. My friends will send me photos all the time. Like, I went over to this person's house for the first time, and there'll be a whole wall of prints there. So yeah.
All things grow in the wild.
So yeah, that is definitely, I think for sure just doing a show in Ypsi and also the Erie, which is our little shop down the street too. Both of those things for sure have kind of definitely helped launch All Things Grow a little bit.
Now, Erie's not run, who's Erie run by?
Erie's run by a woman named Jeanette. She started it maybe 2 or 3, maybe it's been longer than that. I really have no sense of time or memory or anything.
Yeah.
I'm terrible about it. But yeah, she is just a dedicated Michigan artist market. So it's only Michigan vendors. Everything's handmade. So yeah, it's been great to work with her.
So do you have any new wholesale products that are coming out then?
Yeah, so I've been experimenting with sun prints this summer. I'd like to make some sun print stuff, maybe just some jewelry. Just kind of, I used to like to make all kinds of things once upon a time.
Yeah, isn't that crazy how it just stops?
It is, yeah, it just stops. And I don't have anything to complain about. Like, what I do is so fulfilling to me. I really couldn't ask for anything more. Like, it's so, I love it so much. Like, I can just draw, and I wish there was more time for how many ideas. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know you're in the same boat.
Preaching to the crowd over here. Like, the only thing, like, my biggest problem is, like, time management and finding time to actually sit down and make something new and create. That's the
hardest part.
Because you can make things till your face turns blue.
Yes, I know. And just, like, it's hard to look at a whole pile of orders you need to fill and say, no, I'm going to go design something new right now. It's so hard to do, but you have to do it, you know? I wish I could just make new things, though.
Yeah. Do you have any, like, time management tips or, like, because that's, like, I feel like that is, like, the biggest thing for everyone.
Yes. I know what works. I don't necessarily do it.
Right.
I have learned what works is to come down into the studio first thing in the morning. And to, what doesn't work is when you get up and, like, have 4 cups of coffee and, like, dick around all day. And, there are definitely ways you can procrastinate and still be working. But you're not really doing what actually needs to be done.
Yep.
I heard advice a long time ago, and I have no idea where it came from, but Courtney and I have talked about this a lot since, and it was basically, if you don't, it's not so, by the time I get downstairs and I'm ready, the advice, okay, back up, but the advice was basically go down into your workspace and just tell yourself you have to spend 5 minutes there. And, if you're not feeling it after 5 minutes, you can go do something else.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it doesn't, I've never tried this and haven't been immediately working within 10 minutes, and then just 8 hours later, the day is gone,
Yeah.
So that's helped a lot, just dragging myself, especially when you have a space that's separate. Just dragging myself into it has made a huge difference.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. The problem I'm having most recently is that, so I don't have cable television, but I have Amazon Prime, and right now you have Twin Peaks new episodes and now Game of Thrones new episodes that are on Monday. So, like, I'll wake up in the morning, fix myself a cup of coffee, and be like, oh, yeah, it's cool if I just watch these 2 full episodes before I do any work. And then I'm just like, oh, shit, it's like 2 o'clock. What do I do now?
No, it's so hard. The struggle is real to
Oh, my gosh.
be in charge of yourself. It really is.
Ugh.
It is. I don't know if it's easier if you have an actual workplace. I don't know.
Yeah. What has been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome starting your own business?
That's a good question. I would say the general sense of anxiety about so many things, about like where, I mean, the most obvious one is like where your next dollar is coming from, because just having to make it all happen for yourself is so nerve-wracking all the time, always. I don't know if that ever goes away. Yeah, definitely that for sure. And just kind of, I think a lot of, especially just if you're a creative business owner, I mean, it's really hard to separate your identity from what you make. And, you know, there's always nervousness about like anything you put out into the world and how it's going to be received, how it's going to work for you. After the election last year, I started doing these more political prints. It was right after the inauguration I started doing those.
Why don't you say what's on those so that our listeners can...
There are 3 designs. 2 of the designs are taken from protest posters that I saw at the Women's March. One is "We are the granddaughters of the witches you could not burn." The other one is kind of, it says "not going back," and then kind of lists all the different things that we're not going back to in this crazy fucked up situation. And then I have a welcome sign that's been great. It's been in classrooms and businesses. It's so cool to see how it's spread.
And that says...
it says "Welcome all sizes, all colors, all ages, all cultures, all beliefs, and all identities. All people are safe here."
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah. It was really, because I don't make political stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a hard decision to decide to do that. I sent a letter to the 10 or 15 stockists that I have really good relationships with, and was like, "I'm thinking about doing this. I would love to hear your feedback." It was an amazing decision. I'm really glad I did it, and I'm definitely, it taught me that playing things safe is not worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it to like run toward what you're interested in and passionate about and what you feel strongly about.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, putting those out there was scary. I was afraid I was going to lose a ton of customers and a ton of support. But if anything, the opposite holds true. It kind of galvanizes people around you, you know?
Yeah, and like you might lose like 1 or 2 followers, but at the end, like...
Yeah. To me, it's worth it to like stick to your guns, you know?
Yeah.
For sure.
And who do you want to support you, too?
Yeah.
So, that being said, do you have any, like, new products coming up in the future?
Yeah, so I kind of have been on a schedule where every spring I release around 10 new designs, and then every August, September, I do another 10. So right now I'm working on kind of the 10 that I'm going to release into fall and winter. And like finding the time to do those is crazy and challenging. Last night I was drawing till like 1 in the morning. 'Cause you also kind of just have to do it like when the mood strikes you too also. So yeah, all of the new stuff I've been working on has a lot more to do with kind of our spiritual ties to nature.
Yeah.
Yep. I mostly have been I kind of looked at everything I've made in the past, and everything I've made in the past, it's always been nature focused, but I kind of feel like I've just kind of been like leaving things at the altar of nature, so to speak, and I'm trying to figure out ways to kind of transcribe what it means to people more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have any big plans for your business coming up? for the next year or so?
I don't have any huge plans. I'm kind of, right now, the last year, I'd say, has been overwhelming. Like, what I would really like is to kind of be in control of my business instead of feeling like it's controlling me. Mm-hmm. That's my main goal right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, my hardest thing ever was realizing I was not taking care of myself and, like, only doing my business to the point where for, like, 6 months, I did not notice how unhealthy I was.
Yeah.
And I had, like, an intervention. People being like...
Or did you have other people at an intervention? Or did you...
No, I had, like, 4 people come up to me. They're like, Jody, you don't look okay. And I'm like... I mean, that might have been because I was going through a breakup too. But like actually, like taking time out of the day to take care of yourself is such a huge thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've definitely learned those lessons over the last few years too.
Yeah,
it's like you learn. It's so crazy how just I don't know human behavior works. I guess because you'll know what works for you, but you won't take the time to do it, you know?
Right.
Which is so difficult. Like this all, everything I do works so much better, like, if I eat the right things and, like, get some physical activity and, just everything works better. But when you're staring a deadline in the face, it's hard to be like, okay, time to take a break and go, go work out or go, like, make a nice dinner.
It's so easy to be like, should I go to the gym today? No, actually, I should just, like, work all day. And, like, for me, it's like me sitting in a chair in front of my computer, like, quote, I'm doing air quotes right now, working. Oh, my God.
I know. I think the thing is, too, the more things you have on your plate, the better overall you are at managing your time. Like, if you make all those things a priority, your work time is probably more efficient also, in my experience. But in the moment, telling yourself those things can be really hard when you have a lot to do, for sure.
Is a fact. So if you could go back in time and give yourself advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, there would be so many things. I would be more flexible about, like I don't know, I think you can get in your head how something should be and you don't take the time to kind of listen to other people's thoughts on it, or, even now I will get stuck in a rut of doing something and not realize kind of what's working or what's not. I would go back and tell myself that. What else would I...
I feel like you and I are very similar in, like, the bullheadedness.
Yes, I know. I am so...
Are you a Taurus?
No, I am. I was actually born on the solstice, which sometimes... The winter solstice, which sometimes makes you a Sagittarius and sometimes makes you a Capricorn.
Okay.
Depending on what horoscope you look at. I am kind of organized like a Capricorn, but will make like crazy decisions sometimes that just with like no thought or planning. I feel like that's definitely super Sagittarius. So yeah. Yeah. Kind of a mix of both, but I am so stubborn. It's ridiculous.
Oh, I am too. I totally am too. It's actually like you're talking about like the working thing. Like I feel that way. And yeah, it's so ridiculous.
It is.
And like, even like, just like for advice too, which is like a crazy thing. Like looking back and seeing, like trying to give myself advice. I'm so bullheaded that I would be like, people give me advice and I'm like, yeah, but now you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like,
noted, but
there's some people, there's some people that I would have been like, God damn it, I wish I would have took their advice.
I know. I know, for sure. Listen to others more, definitely.
Yeah,
always.
For sure. So speaking of which, what advice would you give to those who are just starting out?
I would tell people... one, like we were talking about with the more political stuff, do what you want to do, what speaks to you. If people are going to engage with you, it's because you have a unique voice and not just because you're regurgitating whatever is around you, which is so hard to ignore, you know? But yeah, definitely figure out what you want to make and make that. And don't just try to like, I mean, in kind of the illustration world, there are so many, and I know you talked about this with Kristen too. There are so many trends out there, and it can be a hard trap to fall into, to be like, oh, I'm just going to make whatever is kind of in the ethos around me because that's doing well for this other person. But I feel like I've always felt like people can tell when you're not being yourself. Like, you know, if one print that I make doesn't really represent myself, it doesn't do as well as the ones that do.
Yeah, 100%. Be true to you.
And there's virtually no difference, you know, in just the outward appearance of one another, but I feel we'll feel such a strong connection to one, and it will do so much better than the other. It's crazy. So yeah, that for sure. And also try not to get an idea in your head of what you're going to do and just run with it and listen to other people and consider, you know, kind of all the different ways you can make a living and the different ways you can kind of spread yourself out, which is, it's so hard to kind of have a hand. Like, I know you do freelance and then you do shows, and it's so hard to kind of have a hand in all those different pots. But the best thing is that if something suddenly changes and you can't quite make a living one way, then, you know, the other thing you do is kind of there as backup, you know?
Well, and that's why I personally do freelance and my illustration business. And I actually thought about this because there was a gentleman that I used to work with at Tech Shop, which is a local maker space in Allen Park. And he gave me some of the best advice I had ever gotten, was that all businesses moving forward offer two things, and this is why they do good. They can offer a service and a product. So, like, yes, I can offer custom service, and I can also offer this product that I just sell, which makes so much sense to me, too, because if you're just selling an item without any, like... So think about customs, ladies and gentlemen. Think about custom, because that can be your service.
It can, yeah. I have not as much in recent years, but did a ton of logos or like wedding chalkboards along the way. Lots of wedding invitation suites. All of those things are a great way to kind of have multiple streams of income coming in. So you're not as much freaking out about if something, you know, falls flat on its face, you know? Yeah. For sure.
So the last round of questions are fire round questions.
Okay. Fire them at me.
I asked them all. Because I know that you do fairs. What is the weirdest, funniest thing that you've ever heard somebody say at a fair to you about your work?
Oh... The one that sticks out the most is someone came up to me. Like, people always have... Either people have no idea what silk screening is, or they have a weird limited experience with it. A guy was like, oh, screen printing, that's really messy, right? Like, he was like, that was his, stuck in his jaw about screen printing. He's like, it's so messy, I don't even know how you do it. Like, I'm like, it's not a slip and slide. Like, it's not like... He was just so adamant about how messy it was.
Two other fire round questions. What is your favorite book and your current favorite album?
Maybe my favorite all-time book was The Prophet by Gibran, which is just like, it's almost like a spiritual biblical text, but it doesn't really adhere to any religion, and it just talks about kind of every facet of one's life in a really beautiful way. I do a lot of audiobooks, though, and I love when the author reads the book. So that's mostly what I do nowadays. I just finished up David Sedaris' new book, which is so good. I love his stuff on audiobook. It's excellent.
Oh, I love David Sedaris.
Yeah, that was probably this year's favorite book. Last year's, have you read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
I have not yet, but I'm really excited because I did the Plymouth Art in the Park, and they gave every single vendor a copy of
Really?
Big Magic.
They did? That's so awesome.
How cool is that?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. I listened to her
As
book
like a
also.
thank you.
That's so cool. What a great gift.
Yeah.
I listened to her read that book, and it was so good. And, I'm not a huge fan of her fiction work, but I think the way she talks about the creative process is so interesting, and at least for me, it was so relatable, and was definitely, she talks a lot about kind of all of the demons you face when you're trying to make things and put them out there.
Yeah.
It definitely, I almost need to go listen to it again, because there are like 5 or 6 lessons that I feel like are, I almost need like tattooed on my face or
Yeah, I'm like actually
put up on my wall.
really looking forward to reading that book.
It's a really good read for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite album?
Oh man. Oh, that's so hard.
Or even like listening to while you're working?
I am a music junkie. I love so many different kinds of music. It's really hard to even pick a genre, let alone an album.
This week, this day, like what is your favorite music?
I really love an indie band from about 10 years ago called Granddaddy. Betty also, big fan.
Yes.
They have a newer album. It's their first album that's been released in maybe like 8 years. It's so good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been on the Granddaddy train.
What album?
What is it called? It's on my Spotify. I love how much they talk about the intersection of technology and nature. Their new album's called Last Place. But yeah, this kind of like how much technology is messing with our lives is a super consistent theme in their work. And there are a lot of songs about how if you're able to like literally escape like to me, I picture it like cords wrapped around you and you're able to like break free and go into nature, how transformative that can be and how unusual it can be compared to your regular routine. So yeah, I love that about their music.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely put all those links in the show notes and on the webpage, so y'all can check them out. Marcy's favorite book and album. So if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Oh, there's a few different ways. My regular website is marcydavy.com. Instagram is @marcydavy. If you want to learn more about Dipsy, that is dipsy.com.
Cool. All right. Marcy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that concludes episode number 15. To find out more about Marcy and all things grow, head on over to DetroitCraftAcademy.com, where you can find pictures and links to the things we talked about on the show. If you are enjoying the podcast, please be sure to head on over to iTunes and review the show. Your support helps. And don't forget to mark your calendar for DIY Ipsy, August 5th and 6th. And until next time, keep on crafting your dreams.
Detroit Craft Academy. Detroit Crafts with Jody. Detroit Craft Academy.